He was a great first-time director, you know. He really sort of set a pace on that movie, and I think he really made me think, God, if this is what movie making is like, then I really want to stick with it, you know. He was great. I met him a few times briefly, and I'm a big fan of his music. I don't know I don't know about any of those stories if they're true or not, but I love his music, I'll say that. I'm thrilled with it. I think it's one of the greatest movies ever made. I'm so happy with it. I've seen it so many times. I could never get sick of it. I think it's the greatest movie. If I thought about that, I don't know. I don't know if I could. I mean, I don't think about that. No, I couldn't. That's just too weird. It would make me too nervous. I mean, he got really into his character, and to the point where I didn't know when he was in character, when he wasn't. I was just clueless all the time, which was great, because when you're working with a director who's enthusiastic, it's like when you're working with an actor who gets into character, motivates you to get into character. And he treated me like he would treat Myra, which helped, you know, very protective, and helped me sort of feel that way and play it that way. Well, it's always different. I always try to develop, you know, really develop a relationship with them and work as closely with them as I possibly can, and I've had mostly wonderful experiences. So. When you're working with a director who feels that way about what they're doing, it's really great, because they just motivate you. You know how important it is to them, and so it becomes that important to you, and you just combine the efforts and just really just go for it. It's great. I didn't want to hear her version of it. There were too many versions flying around, and everyone was confused, and everyone was believing who they were playing, and so it was just turned out to be like a bunch of different movies that we hadn't really got one story straight yet. So I just talked to her. I just wanted to more capture her spirit than anything else. Just sort of, you know, how she is as a person, as opposed to what really happened, because I think that with everybody, the truth tends to bend a little bit over the years. Yeah, I think it started out when she first met Jerry Lee, and when they first sort of struck up their romance. It started out as she was just like, she was a schoolgirl, you know, she wore bobby socks, and she listened to the music, and she thought he was really cute. She had a big crush on him. And then after, you know, he sort of swept her away and married her, and she was sort of, and it all got out, and the scandal started happening, she was just sort of forced to grow up really fast. And that sort of all of a sudden made her a woman, and before it was time to become a woman. So I think she had like that was a really interesting time, a couple years. Well, I could never really play comedy as comedy, like punchline and all that. That just takes me right out of the character. So I took everything very seriously when I was doing it, and it just ended up being funny. So, you know, I was lucky. But I could never just play comedy as comedy. That doesn't work for me. I really don't look for anything. I just wait till it hits me, and if it hits me, then I'll do it. If it doesn't, I won't. Mm-hmm. Well, my parents are writers, and my father has a book business, so he deals with rare books. And they wrote a book when I was pretty young about turn-of-the-century writers, women writers who were used opium while they wrote. And it was Louisa May Alcott and Edith Wharton they contracted, well, Louisa May Alcott had contracted something during being a nurse, and so she started taking opium after that, and same with Wharton. So they wrote a book about that, and I was always surrounded by these books. And
they weren't really pushed on me. I mean, I wanted to read them, but I read a lot of the classics, so I was very familiar with it, which was so great. What was so great about reading the script and actually reading a really amazing adaptation of a really brilliant novel, you know.
Concern unflattering, or, but even untrue, that's fine.
Well, I've been really lucky because I haven't been really picked on that much. And I just didn't read, I just tried to stay away from it. I mean, it hurt the first few times, and then I just had to, if I paid any attention to it, I was just going to get annoyed, so I just didn't pay any attention to it. And the important things in my life can't get affected by it, you know, my family, my friends, and my work, you know. I just leave it out of my life completely. I don't take the bait. I mean, growing up with the millions of people watching you, I mean, in movies, you either have to get over it or you're just going to die. You're just going to die from the pressure. So I thought I either had to embrace it or keep fighting it, and I fought it for a long time, and I'm trying now to embrace it. But sure, I mean, it's like peer pressure in school, peer pressure in, I mean, cliques, gossip, all that. It's the same that happened in that society in the 1800s. I mean, gossip can make or break you, and you look at now, I mean, you look at, you know, what's happening to, I mean, in movie stars, you know, one rumor gets out of hand. Well, I remember I was really moved by the idea of impossible love, a love that couldn't be. Not so much as I mean, there's like Romeo and Juliet and those kind of stories, but this was different because they could have, but they chose, but they couldn't. It was, it's kind of hard to explain. I mean, you know what I mean, but it was like the sacrifices and the head over heart, following your head instead of your heart. I felt like trying that. You know, I hadn't done that since Heather's, and I really wanted to, you know, I had been getting requests from my fans had been writing me letters saying, why don't you make a movie about us? And so I kind of did it for them. Oh, sure. I think it's like the charm of the movie is that it's very truthful, and it's very familiar, and I know a lot of people who are kind of combinations of all those people, and so yeah, that was nice. Well, I was very, I was a tomboy. I was obsessed with movies. I was kind of, it's hard for me to look back. I don't really know. Oh, I was very quiet. I didn't go to school much. Because I started working in movies when I was 13. So I was away a lot. And I was a very good student, though, academically. And the time I did spend in school, I had one best friend who's still my best friend since 8th grade. I would probably be a lot like her if I hadn't have become an actress. You know, I mean, very creative, eager, little ambitious, ambitious in the sense that, you know, she really wants to get her work out there and be respected for it, and
you know, self-doubting, a little neurotic, but generally a very good person with a good heart.
I read that book annually. I mean, I still read that book all the time. It's a very personal book to me, always will be. I think the feelings that you feel when you're a kid, especially the alienation, is something that you carry with you throughout your whole life, and I think it's no less important than the feelings that you feel when you're an adult. It's like people always write off young love, like, oh, it's young love, like it's not as important as older love, when it's just as painful. And as you know, when you're 40 and you're getting divorced, when you're breaking up with your first love, it's just as painful, and the feelings are just as important. So I don't think we should ever write off what kids feel as, ah, they're young, you know, they'll get over it. In retrospect, I think, yeah, I was kind of different. I might have stood out or not stood out, or was shy, or maybe alienated a bit, but I wasn't. I can only look at that in retrospect. At the time, I can't really remember how it felt, except that it felt pretty lousy, probably. Yeah, it's a drag, but it's just part of life. I don't completely associate it with show business like most people. I think there's just as much phoniness in other jobs and other situations than in Hollywood. I mean, Hollywood is always pigeonholed as the phoniest place on the planet, and maybe it is in some ways, but I think there's just as much fake smiling and all that in any walk of life. It's just something you get used to, and you try not to do it yourself, and you try not to surround yourself with it, and when you have to be around it, you just try to let it go past you, just get past it. Yeah, I think for most girls, women, I think none of us had ever seen a woman survive in a movie like that. Usually they get killed or get rescued by a man, but no woman had ever done it on her own like Ripley did, and that had a really big impact on me growing up, and as someone who wanted to be an actress and thought, you know, oh, if I ever am in the movies, I'll probably, you know, have to get killed off or something like most of the women's roles. So, in those kind of movies. So, it was, you know, and I love science fiction too, so. It was gave a certain sense of, I don't know what the word is. I mean, it's like when you see that, and it's so revolutionary because it had never been done before, seeing a woman kick ass like that, you really it was just really, really exciting to see and to follow her through the whole series, you know. You get very attached to Ripley, and you care about her very much.
Yeah, I didn't read the book until I was 21, but when I was about 19, I was, I think, going through a pretty rough time, as I think anyone would back me up in saying that 19, 20 are rough years for everybody, not just, I mean, everybody. And I was exhausted. I'd been working a lot, and I was going through a lot of changes in my life. At 19, I was having some tough times, and I was exhausted, and so I was able to afford to check myself into a place for exhaustion, but it was for exhaustion, but it was a psychiatric ward. But I only stayed a couple of days. I was there voluntarily, so it was different than the film. But it was an interesting couple of days, and I learned a lot. I mean, I learned that, you know, even the doctors don't have the answers, you know. They can't give you the cliff notes to happiness, you know. You have to learn it on your own, by yourself. I think they're awfully fun to watch, and very exciting. I mean, the times that I was nominated, it was 2 times, and it was incredibly exciting times. I mean, I find them to be very exciting when you're nominated, and they're fun to watch. You know, it's a Hollywood tradition. Yeah, it was. It was sort of her entrance in the film. And it really is Angelina's scene. I mean, she's a fantastic actress. She's a brilliant actress. I'm in awe of her talent. She's absolutely wonderful, and working with her was amazing. And she just sort of came in with such force and so aggressive, and it was terrifying. Well, I have a I either cut my own hair, or I have this great hair cutter, Philip Carrion, who is so amazing. I tell you, he is one of the best in the world. He can make anybody look just fantastic. And he gave me this haircut, and he's great.
I mean, I hope so. I hope that we're always making progress. I mean, I'm not really sure, because I don't work too much on the business end of making movies. I did on Girl Interrupted, and that was wild. I mean, if you had a couple hours, I could let you know. But yeah, I hope we're making progress, and it's hard though. It's hard getting movies made. And Girl Interrupted took 7 years to get that movie made. That's a long time. No. It didn't really. I was pretty spiritually stable. I think that comes from my parents, who were really amazing. And this was sort of a real genre movie, you know, so it was kind of like going into this other world for a couple of months. But I mean, watching the tapes, we watched some tapes when we were doing research, me and Ben Chaplin, the cast. That was, you know, they were really frightening to watch these exorcisms, or so-called exorcisms, depending on what you believe. But I walked away from it thinking that they were people with you know, either schizophrenia or very severe mental problems, and not people who were genuinely possessed. I don't think there's such thing. But you know, in order to play the role in an honest way, you know, you try to open your mind as much as you can. Yeah, I think that a lot has to do with me staying. I'm from San Francisco, and I never moved to LA. Like when I started acting very young, I remained home. I just did it. They only let me work during the summers, and I always still live up north, up there. And but I think it was they never taught me that any religion was bad or wrong. They encouraged me and my brothers and my sister to sort of take from each religion whatever we could and make up our own, you know, sort of. My father was more of the, you know, religion is the opiate of the masses, you know, and it causes, and it does, if you go to Northern Ireland or Yugoslavia, you know, you realize that it's being used so horrifically. But if you go to what religion really is, I do believe that you can find yourself in it. But I just was raised more, my mother's a Buddhist, and I follow that a little bit more than anything else. But I was lucky, you know. They encouraged me to make up my own.